Alright, I did my research for this video, so there'll actually be some sources referenced. Now, today's topic will be on action and reaction, coups and stabilization. Essentially, the matter is political shifts and how, when it becomes violent, things tend not to be peaceful. Kind of how violence works. Now, the first question is, what do I mean by action and reaction here? Let's start with that, assuming my pen works. So, when it comes to political stances and how people behave, there will be actions and reactions to whatever someone does. Think of it as the equal and opposite reaction situation of basic physics. One person makes a move, another person reacts to that move, and in the end, what we have is our current state. For example, using a basic one that a lot of Americans will understand, let's say you walk into McDonald's and you make your order and you pay. That's your action. Their reaction is to log it, send it back, and hopefully the kitchen actually makes it properly. Do they always? Nah, but you hope. And so, action, reaction, current state. After they do it, eventually the food is made, brought out, you pick it up, you go and maybe you eat at the table or you go home because it was just starting to pick up. But regardless, what ends up happening is, through your actions and their reactions to it, you now have your food and you get to go, even if you're down a bit of money. It's the same in politics. For example, look at current society as it is and as we observe it. We kept going left. First it was gay marriage, then it was the cakes, then the matter of non-binary people came up, then transitioning, then the whole sports fiasco. Now, it's worth noting, action and reaction can be delayed to a small extent. For your average person, especially on the right, this is what they saw. They saw things go from this, I just want to be left alone, to now you must be forced to make this, now you must accept something that you do not believe is scientifically true, and so on and so forth. So what ends up happening is, like a rubber band, things got pulled in one direction. They kept going, and what ended up happening? Well, the strain eventually reached its boiling point, and the rubber band is now shooting back. That's why we saw the populist right rise, especially during the last election in the United States. For a lot of people, their position hadn't changed that much. Sure, it actually went a bit over to the left. For example, we don't see a lot of conservatives now, at least we didn't, say that they don't like gay marriage. It was these things. There was a slight shift to the left, but the issue is policy went so far to the left that for a lot of people on the right, they're like, okay, I can sort of get behind this, I can see the compromise. You just want to live your life? Sure. But as they kept pushing, they're like, hold on. And so, eventually, the band is snapping back, and we get the reaction. Trump is that reaction in the United States. The alternative for Germany is that reaction in Germany. Of course, reform is that reaction in the UK, and so on and so forth. These reactions are going to create a new world. Now, how that world looks, I cannot say, because actions and reactions are not one-time things. As mentioned by this, with these delays, you can have multiple actions and then a delayed reaction as well. Things are not static. And so, where, say, I make an action, you make a reaction, and we can keep going, and the current state shifts as our actions go by. Things will naturally result in a sort of build-up of pressure if they go too far too fast. Now, you can argue sometimes that's necessary, but no matter what, that tension that comes from it is going to cause issues. Remember, the standard person who was fine with gay marriage in 2008, they may shift a bit more to the left nowadays, but they're still not here. They are not there. They might be here at most. And so you're going to have a reaction. The issue is, of course, the slippery slope and how the reaction is characterized by it. Some things do inevitably lead down a path. For example, if you have a progressive ideology, meaning we must keep progressing, that leads to constant shifts. And that's what a lot of conservatives were worried about, because they saw this as basically the inevitable result. Unfortunately, however, we also see the problem for people like me. Where I'm about here, I'll be frank. I'm going to tolerate gay marriage, and I don't really care. I'm an individualist, not my problem. But what I'm seeing a lot of conservatives doing is recognizing this rubber banding happening. They're trying to go even farther to the right to course correct, essentially saying that start with gay marriage only got worse, so we shouldn't let it happen at all. The whole situation was based on just a general perspective that the conservatives had of, we let them have this, and they kept making demands, so we can't let them have anything, or else this is going to keep happening. And as you can see, it's not leading to a good thought process for a lot of conservatives. Am I one of them? Not really. I just don't trust the left with power anymore. Frankly, have I ever trusted them with power? Probably. But I don't remember when it was, so it doesn't matter. But that is a big deal. If you're the left and you want to truly make the world better and you believe your ideas are the way to do so, you have to remember, your goal is not to appease me. Your goal is not to appease the extremists. It's to get the moderates on side. And the best way to do that, legitimately, is to go slow. The moderates are, shall we say, pretty stupid sometimes. But the fact is, they are the majority, and no matter how much an extremist like me screams into the void, most people aren't going to care. But if a dude that everyone has some opinions they share with, just standard moderate person, they might be willing to listen, saying, okay, maybe I don't agree with everything they say, but, they seem alright, they seem like they know what they're doing, and they support this cause, so, hey, maybe I should too. That's the thing. You don't want to go too fast, like what happened with the left in recent years. Because if you go very, very quickly, what ends up happening is the rebound is going to be as bad, if not worse. Now, granted, I don't want that to happen. I would like this rebound to stop about here. Stop at gay marriage. No forcing the cakes, no forcing any of this. Stop right here. The issue is, how do you do that? Now, it's not easy, but it's technically possible if you're able to convince them. Don't convince them from a left-wing perspective, though. They don't care about the left's perspective because all they saw was this. If you want to convince someone who's on the more conservative or traditionalist end of things to side with you, you have to appeal to conservation and tradition. You have to say, okay, I get it, you don't like going that fast, but can we at least have this because we will accept that as a compromise? Or otherwise ask, maybe that since this is becoming tradition, we shouldn't get rid of it because there is a big culture where this is acceptable. Let's face it, that's just how things are. But we also must remember part of this is due to collectivism. I don't use that word lightly, and I know exactly what I'm referring to this. You see, collectivism involves thinking of people in terms of collectives, and your policies being based around collectives. This is as opposed to individualism, which focuses instead on the idea of people as individuals. They say, alright, the smallest minority is the individual, therefore we shall judge people as individuals. Collectivists look at people as groups. Here's the issue. When you have a collectivist enemy, the most common response is collectivism in return. For example, the left and many of their belief systems are collectivists. As a matter of fact, it's inherent to them through their egalitarianism. So all we saw, from the right's perspective, was a bunch of collectivists saying, hey, do this because of insert thing here. It could be because white people are historically privileged and they need to be taken down a peg, or we need to redistribute success so that black people can rise and other historically oppressed minorities can get their footing. Whatever the argument they made, it was entirely rooted in collectivist thought. There was no, well, this individual has been treated poorly. It was, black people have been treated poorly and this person is black, therefore. So, what ended up happening? The right went collectivist as well. Now, some went farther than others, but the fact is, our nature as humans inherently encourages collectivist thought when we are threatened, especially by larger groups. Because think about it, we are social creatures. Our nature is to seek out others and be with them because that's how we kept ourselves safe for a long time. What happens then when you see 10 people all telling you that you should do what they say, but you don't want to? Well, you go to 5, 6 people, maybe more, saying, hey, we don't like those guys, and I believe they'll come after you next, so if you help me be protected from them, then we'll all be better off. You seek collective protection and cooperation. Now, that's not always a good thing, but it's our nature to do so. So what ended up happening was the right was fueled by the left, whether the left intended on it or not, to become more and more collectivist. Because for a lot of, especially moderate right-wingers, they were willing to go here. They were willing to say live and let live. Hold on, let me correct that E there. They were willing to say live and let live. That's fine. You guys can get married. Ain't our problems. Have fun with that. But what ended up happening was all these things kept going, and a lot of the people who are willing to tolerate this now don't, because they see it as, oh freak, we let the collectivists over there harm us, so we can't trust them with anything. We gotta work together on this to ensure that we don't have that happen again. Is that a good thing? No. No, it isn't. And as an individualist myself, I find it quite annoying, because the left, despite wanting to make the world better, ended up making my life and everyone else on the right who has a modicum of level of respect for individualism go, oh freaking heck, because half of our freaking neighbors are going collectivist. It's like talking to a bunch of idiots. One side hates me because I don't believe in equality. I'll get to that. The other side hates me because I'm not willing to take away gay rights. It's like, ugh. It gets annoying. Plain and simple. But, with everything going on, we must consider it and realize that collectivism breeds collective responses. So if you don't want people judged based on collective traits, stop doing it yourself. The best way to go down to an individual level is to drop the collective care. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, the collectivists are right. Let's say the racists are right and the sexists are right, just for the sake of argument. Whites are superior to blacks, and women are superior to men on average. What does that matter to the person you're dealing with right now? Like, honestly, what does it matter? Because if that's the starting point, if the average is here, and this person could be any one of these dots, anyone along this line could be that person you're dealing with. What does this matter? Because what you're trying to figure out is what this person is. Or this person. Not this. Sure, the average man could beat the average woman in a boxing match, most likely. But what does that matter? If it's an average Joe against Ronda Rousey, I hate to break it to you, but that nose is not going to be very stable on that guy's face. The fact is, when it comes to collectivism, it works as a sort of bracketed equality, especially when it comes to hierarchical belief systems, like the progressive stack. You say, alright, everyone's in this group, therefore they are here. Everyone's in this group, therefore they are here. So on and so forth, placing everyone where they believe they should be. Is that productive? No, especially for a society as complicated as our own. With a society as ours is, where skill is needed on every single level of the functions for, say, a factory or an office. It does not help us. Specialization works because it is individual. We don't force every Asian person to go into those high-paying, very mathematically challenging fields. Nor do we force every white person to go into factory work and all black people into the farms. We don't do that because that's wildly impractical. We instead say, okay, you're an individual, we'll look at what you're good at and what you want to do, and then we'll accept you into this field if we believe you're capable enough to do so. That is merit. It's also productive. There is no benefit to collectivist nonsense, because it just breeds the worst reasons to behave the way you do. Because if you are looking at things from a collective perspective, it is easy to ignore your part as an individual. For example, if you're surrounded by 100 people, what does it matter if you do one bad thing? The others will make up for it, right? Especially for the lazy, that is a very real problem, because for a lazy person, it's a lot easier to just hide behind the collective and say, yeah, it's fine, I'm sure the others will handle it. But that's not what makes society better. What makes society better is when people voluntarily do what they believe is best to improve society on an individual scale. Because if everyone's doing that, society's better off for everyone. Heck, even just one person doing it helps those in the local vicinity. After all, would you rather have a neighbor that cares for his lawn, family, and other parts of his house? Or someone who has beer bottles in the grass, is abusive to his wife, and is generally just a giant nuisance? Pretty sure most of us would pick the first one without hesitation. And if you pick the second, I have several questions for you. But regardless of what I just said, the fact is, when we're dealing with people, it is better to look at individual level traits and judge from there. And that's why I have such a big deal with equality. Told you I was getting to it. Equality does not exist. I have a video on it, Equality and Hierarchy. But to summarize, we are not equal, not from birth, and definitely not now. Because we are unique, diverse, so to speak. Look at my hands. Are they the same as yours? No. Are they capable of the same things as yours? No. Just my hands are different. Look at every part of me and you'd find the exact same truth. Doesn't matter my race, doesn't matter my sex. I could be one and the same with everyone, and that would not be the society we live in. If I actually became one and the same with everyone, the entire notion of merit goes out the window, because if everyone can fit in the same boxes, then you have no point in judging for anything else. You just put people where they can go. Merit exists because people are unequal, because society, by its nature, is not only unfair, but hierarchical. Hierarchy is a natural state. As humans, we go along with this, not because it's a social construct we completely made up, but because we're naturally going to be sorted into a hierarchy anyways. Might as well make sure this one is based on merit and not nepotism, or some other useless thing that we decide is good for the day. Because when you do, it creates problems. To quote Yuri Bezmenov, if we put the principle of equality in the basis of our social political structure, it is the same thing as building a house on sand. The fact is, when you base your entire belief system around people being collectively equivalent, you are not going to have a strong political system. You're going to have an insecure location because you cannot truthfully have an equal society. There cannot be any equality between them, short of forcing people to be equal. But then, there are some times where extreme action is required. For example, slavery. Now, for others, like Europeans who may not have engaged in slavery for so long, it may seem weird to think of slavery as a big issue. Because sure, slavery existed, and for many Europeans it wasn't, that big a deal compared to all the other things they were doing. Seriously, the amount of people they subjugated was, Yeah. But for the United States, hello, that's where I'm from, it was a very big deal because those who had the power, especially in the South, were the slavers, the planters. And so you cannot just say, oh, well, we should take it slow, because the planters aren't going to let you take it slow. As we saw with the Civil War, just the idea of stopping the expansion of slavery resulting enough for the planters to throw their hands in the air and say, yep, this process has failed. We clearly need a new state. We're going to leave. In situations like that, there cannot be a slow roll. Because when you're dealing with a side you know is not going to do things basically in a moral sense or in a moral way, yeah, there can be no compromise in such a situation. So, the action needs to be extreme. Will the reaction be extreme as well? Certainly. But sometimes that's what's necessary. And the moment force is introduced, the moment force enters the equation, there is one truth. It'll be decided by blood. For example, let's use a modern one. Israel and Palestine. The moment Palestine draws a sword and Israel responds, there is not going to be an answer without blood on the streets. There is going to be a battle, and force, being the final arbiter that it is, will resolve when one of them is dead. Is that a good thing? Nah, it's a waste of resources on a lot of occasions, but that's how things are. The moment force enters the equation, you cannot shy away from fighting. The moment peace is off the table, you cannot hide behind this idea that if we just keep things going for a bit longer, maybe we'll find a diplomatic solution. Because that's not peace anymore. That's just quiet. You're not truly making sure there's a peaceful world. You're just accepting atrocity and quiet rather than actually dealing with the problem. When one side has a gun and the other doesn't, and that side with the gun's willing to use it, the other side is not going to survive unless they get ready to respond. Plain and simply, the moment force hits the desk of the people who are dealing with it is the moment any diplomatic answer goes out the window. If things are going to go to violence, they're going to go to violence, so it's better to make it clear and quick. Why did I say the other one? I don't freaking know. I don't think we need a weird battle. But, regardless, the fact is, if you have a battle that's going to come, it's better to get that out the freaking way. For example, we knew what the Nazis were going to do. Hitler wrote a whole freaking book on it. Quite literally titled, My Fight. We knew where he was going with this. Yet we stalled. We stalled, and we allowed millions to die because we would rather have a peace which would not last. We'd rather have peace, which is really just letting the world sound quiet while people were being gunned down in the distance. The immediate response, as soon as the Nazis won power, should have been march to freaking Berlin, overthrow the government, and put one that's not going to kill all the people in there. What did we do instead? Appease. And as soon as that appeasement didn't work, oh, would you look at that? They've got better guns, they've got a better air force, and they are more than willing to use it against us, who have been stalling for years. Yes, I can understand the argument of, we should have tried diplomatic options because at least we can attempt it. But when you know, especially, the ideology and beliefs of the person you're facing, that isn't always an option. Do you think Putin cares for diplomacy? What about Xi Jinping? What about me? I'm an imperialist. What do you think I'm gonna say if you just say, maybe we should avoid conflict? I do not care. The fact is, when you're dealing with people who you know, for a fact, are willing to go to blows to make sure things go the right way, you cannot afford, no, you shouldn't even try to be peaceful, because it won't last. I met plenty of people in school, high school especially, who were, I'll just say it, they're pretty left-wing generally, and they held a belief of almost pacifism. They didn't like the idea of conflict. To which all I can think is, if these people actually truly met someone who was willing to do what they think is currently going on right now, they would not meet anyone outside of a jail cell. They would not be alive. When you deal with things as they are, you're not always going to have an easy option. Sometimes action must be quick and harsh. Slavers should be crushed. I hope that's not a controversial thing to say. Because when it comes down to it, that's sometimes the only play you got that's going to lead to any results. The longer you draw things out, the more suffering there's going to be. The more people are going to die, and the more people are going to wish you had intervened sooner. There are millions of people right now forced under oppressive governments to do things they don't want to do. Do you think a woman who is forced to wear religious garb just because her country says that's how women should dress is really gonna say, I know it'd be bloody, but I would really appreciate it if the society just peacefully did this? At that point, no. She's either gonna just accept her lot, or she's gonna wish for some revenge or some way to get this situation done with. Fact is, we let millions of people suffer on a daily basis, let their basic liberties be violated. Yet we like to pretend that that's peace. That isn't peace. That is a war between individuals and the state. What it is for us is quiet. Millions of people suffer, but we don't hear about it. Our news certainly doesn't care about it. They got bigger, more dramatic things to focus on. It's worthless, really. What is the point, truly the point, of claiming that liberty and justice are for all? For claiming that people should be free, if you're not willing to stake your life on it? Because, fundamentally, liberty without placing your life on it is really privilege. The privilege of not having someone intervene. Something that gets taken away the moment someone pulls a gun or a knife or any weapon, really, and says, you aren't going to do that or else. That's not freedom. That's not freedom at all. And what's the point of that? What is the point of accepting quiet over peace? True peace, where people are free to do what they want as individuals without state intervention stopping them. Is it just the idea of less bloodshed? Because there's gonna be bloodshed. Give people enough time, they will find a way to make sure that happens. But do we want as much bloodshed as we're suggesting will come? Is it better now to just accept the casualties and let things go than stall out, let things be, don't rock the boat, hope that if we just wait long enough, things will resolve themselves? Is it honestly better to do that? Frankly, I believe it's best not to. To accept the casualties now, take it on the chin, and move forwards. Because that's the only thing that's actually going to save lives in the long run. This idea people have of, let's keep trying diplomacy against people and states who clearly do not give a single iota of a care, is just wasting breath and time. Now, I'd like to quote something. I hope you don't mind. It's from the letter from Birmingham jail. I think you guys should know which one this is. And it's about King's biggest problems. The white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action. That is his quote in regards to white moderates in the civil rights movement. And I think it applies regardless because of the simple fact that this order, people say, is not true order. It is a sense of order, a sense of justice. The unwillingness to rock the boat when that becomes the only option, that cowardly behavior, that is not, whether it be through war or through rights, a proper answer. Because, the fact is, once things hit the fan, you'll realize very, very quickly that sense was just that, a sense. It is not true order or true justice. There can be no order when tyranny is ruling. There can be no justice when the tyrant decides. And so, bloodshed becomes the only option. Well then, how do we do it? There are several options. Some may just hope to vote it out. Does this work? Not often, but it could. You could get lucky. Sometimes the ballot works. Many times it doesn't. So what do we do then? Well, few options. One, direct action. That is what Dr. King tried to do. You fight for what you believe in through non-violent moves and actions taken in the hopes that, eventually, things will be better. Will they always be better? No, but you try, and you hope. Here's the thing. Often direct action has many issues. Mainly, you're not going to keep people non-violent for long. So, here's the other option. Assassination. Brutality. It's not a good solution, but it can work. And, when it does, usually it has minimal. But, when the losses pile up, usually we get a coup or a revolution. And of course, there's just the obvious war. Forgive my poor drawings, but hopefully they should do. Now, when it comes down to it, bloodshed is not the preferred option, even for a warmonger like me, I'll admit. Bloodshed is not the preferred option when it comes to things. It's a large amount of resources, generally it's not that rewarding, but also, authoritarianism breeds doing these things because that's who wins. Going back to the examples of my classmates, if a civil war actually broke out in the United States, do you think it'd be them who leads the charge at the end of it? Or do you think it'd be someone like me? Someone willing to say, yeah, to war. 50-50 shot isn't even accurate. It's closer to 90-10 that I'd be the leader. For a simple reason. Pacifism does not survive contact with the enemy. Neither do many things. Plans, reason, logic, any empirical understanding of what's going on. When you reach contact with someone who's willing to spill blood to achieve their results, any sense of rationality goes out the window. And more than that, it's those who are willing to go even more ruthless who tend to come out on top because, well, chaos ain't a ladder. It's a power grab that rewards those willing to spill blood. So you naturally have an inclination towards authoritarians. That's why, for example, we often see in Latin American revolutions, oh yeah, great, the old regime's out. The Sandinista regime in, I believe it's Nicaragua, or the socialist regime in Chile are out. Yay! Wait, you're telling me that someone else is in? Oh great, it's Pinochet. For all Pinochet's reforms and betterment of society, you can't deny the dude was a brutal authoritarian. The fact is, that's what happens when a coup is enacted. You don't get the Cincinnatiists, the Washingtons. You don't get them. You get the Robespierres, the Napoleons. You get the Pinochets. You get those who are willing to, for whatever reason, crush anyone else to ensure their power. It could be due to ideology, maybe it's due to paranoia, maybe it's just due to them being an egotistic piece of garbage. Who knows? But that's who thrives when coups become acceptable as options, when bloodshed becomes the status quo. But what do we do then? Let's say the coup happens. Let's say we get lucky and it's Cincinnatius. They step down from power, and now we have a democratic system, or just a constitutional monarchy with a lot of checks to protect people's liberties. How do you stabilize that situation? Well, there's a few ways, but the most important is to convince people to trust each other. Once blood is in the water, people generally lack trust. Why would I shake your hand when I could end up getting killed the next day? Why would I be friendly when doing so could lead to my untimely end? Well, several reasons. Notably, if you don't care about your life, you can just make sure things go well for those you do care about. But in order to stabilize a society, the best way to do it is to rebuild trust. Start with infrastructure, maybe, but also start with food, start with security. Get the police up and running, make sure the crime is stopped. Because whenever there's a coup or any level of revolt beyond this level, with these things, you're gonna have a lot of crime come from it. Because people see, oh, freak, the law are too busy trying to make sure they don't get conquered. Alright then, we can do whatever the freak we want. It's not a good thing, but it's what happens. And so, cracking down on the opportunists who take advantage of the situation. Making sure that things are stable. Making sure people have food. Making sure that people have good reasons to go out and see their neighbors. That is how you stabilize the situation. More than that, you also have to have some consistency. Latin America is so unstable because they don't have that consistency. Santa Anna was president like 5-10 times, easy. And the reason why is because he just kept coming in, overthrowing the government, and then they would kick him out. He'd come back, do the exact same thing, and so on and so forth. Heck, after an election, the Mexican president was assassinated by his rival in the past. And modern Mexican elections have a lot of people not even able to run because they're too dead to do it, because the cartels don't like them. Latin America especially is rife with such problems. So having that stability, that continual leadership, and the peaceful transition is how you preserve what has been gained. Sometimes bloodshed should not be done. Many times, though, it must be. Because if you want to save more lives, you don't wait to the final hour to draw the sword. You don't hope that speeches and majority votes can solve it while ignoring the musketeer who is already bleeding out his life's blood in the trench because you just like to ignore the fact that people are still fighting over there. No. You accept the burden now, take on the casualties, and accept the bloodshed now so that people in the future don't have to face that. So that kids don't have to grow up without a father because people decided to be pieces of garbage to them. So that women aren't needlessly oppressed under traditionalist regimes or men suffering under regimes that favor women. Fundamentally, bloodshed becomes the only option when force is introduced. But since force will always be there, the real question is, how do you minimize that? It ain't a balance of power. We saw what happened after Napoleon with that balance of power they tried to set up. What ended up happening? Alright, everyone started expanding everywhere else to grow their own power. Or they started developing internally so that they could compete with those who were colonizing and taking over more stuff. Do you think it's a coincidence that Britain owns so much territory in Africa and across the world? No, it isn't. They let the continent fight amongst themselves so they could take more power, because they were worried, oh freak, if this balance of power has to be assumed by, say, France, conquering some place like Algeria, well, what's going to happen to us? Oh, right, we're going to be the number one target again. So, go around, secure more territory. Don't have to worry much about that. What does France think after that? Oh, freak, I need to compete with Britain, otherwise the Royal Navy is going to strangle me. Better conquer parts of Africa. Germany? Oh, freak. I'm neighboring a lot of people who don't like me. What should I do? Take over Africa so I have a chance at competing with all these big colonial powers. Everyone in a balance of power situation is seeking to expand. It becomes an arms race. It is legitimately better to have a single hegemon to enforce peace among everyone than to have a balance of power. Because when there's a balance of power, there's an arms race. When there's an uncontested hegemon, who's racing for arms? No one, because they don't have the option. If they try, the hegemon crushes them, and so long as the hegemon is actually a good leader, like say the United States, following the Pax Americana, then generally, people are going to be happy. So long as peace is maintained and liberty is protected, people will be fine, and stability will slowly rise. Unfortunately, for several societies, these become the only options. It's not a good thing, but it is reality. I will take 1 billion deaths in 1 year to 5 billion in a generation. Because death is death, life is life. We may not have a divine spark that makes us all equal. We may not be truly able to stand one-to-one with our fellow man, but we still have lives that are valuable, and they shouldn't just be wasted. So, take the blood now. Let it cover your hands if necessary. But know that by doing so, or at least hoping that by doing so, you ensure others don't have to make that same sacrifice. It is the next generation who is the most valuable, and then the one following after them. It is not the ones who will fade into obscurity. So, there it is. Maybe what I said doesn't make much sense to you. Fair enough, I'm bad at explaining a lot of things. But I hope you understand at least a bit of it, and I hope you enjoyed. Have a good one.